She watched as her dress was torn apart by a smug TSA agent. But what he didn't know was that her husband controlled the airport. Now it's time for payback. It was just another busy morning at LAX. Crowds hustling to get through security, the hum of flight announcements filling the air. But for Natalia Jenkins, today was different. She wasn't just any passenger in line. Natalia had the kind of style that turned heads. An elegant, floor-length black dress that clung to her curves. Delicate, yet expensive. And all eyes were on her as she breezed through the terminal. Her husband, Joseph Jenkins, was a well-known businessman. The kind of guy who owned half the airport and had connections that could get you into any VIP lounge. Natalia was used to luxury, but she wasn't the type to flaunt it. She didn't need to. She carried herself with that quiet confidence of a woman who knew her worth. But today, none of that mattered. As Natalia approached the TSA checkpoint, she noticed a security agent watching her with an almost unsettling smirk on his face. He was middle-aged, average height, his uniform a little too tight around the shoulders, like he'd been on duty way too long. His eyes lingered on her as she placed her things in the bin, ready to get through the usual routine. But this time, something felt off. "Step aside, ma'am," he said abruptly, his tone cold, almost too formal, like he was trying to flex some power. "We'll need to do a more thorough check. That dress of yours looks expensive." Natalia raised an eyebrow. She'd been through TSA 100 times. She knew the drill. But something about the way he said it, the way he was eyeing her, made her feel a twinge of discomfort. Still, she held her ground. "You're kidding, right?" "It's just a dress," she replied, keeping her voice calm. But there was something in her gut telling her this wasn't going to be a normal check. He didn't say a word. Instead, the agent began rifling through her things, her purse, her carry-on, like he had all the time in the world. Natalia didn't flinch. She'd dealt with worse. But then, without warning, he reached out and grabbed the hem of her dress, jerking it upwards, pulling the fabric with a swift motion. "Hold up! What the hell?" Natalia gasped, feeling the fabric rip under his grip. The sound of tearing silk echoed in the busy terminal, and her heart dropped. "Oops," he said with a twisted grin. "Guess your dress isn't as sturdy as it looks. Looks like it's not even worth that much, huh?" Natalia stood there, frozen, shock racing through her veins. The rip wasn't just a little tear. It was a full-on gash in the fabric, right down the side of her dress, leaving a wide-open tear that ruined the whole look. The other passengers, once casually waiting in line, now had their eyes on her, murmurs and whispers spreading like wildfire. "Are you serious?" Natalia managed to choke out, her voice low but sharp, as anger started bubbling up inside her. The agent didn't even apologize. Instead, he just shrugged, as if it was all part of the job. "Hey, sometimes things get a little rough. It's not my fault your dress was fragile." Natalia could feel the eyes of the crowd on her, some of them with pity, others with judgment. She tried to keep her head high, but inside her blood was boiling. This wasn't just about the dress anymore. It was the humiliation, the feeling that her worth was being reduced to nothing more than a joke, a piece of cloth to be torn apart for someone else's amusement. But there was more, much more. This wasn't just some careless TSA agent. This was something deeper. Natalia had been here before. She'd been the target of prejudice in more ways than one. The whispers of racism, of judgment based on her skin color, were never far behind. And this agent? He had the look of someone who saw her as less than. "You're going to pay for that, you know," she said, her voice icy now, her patience wearing thin. "Sure, whatever," the agent muttered dismissively, clearly not bothered by the situation. "File your complaint, sweetheart. It's not like I'm the one who's going to be on the hook for a few $1,000. That was it. Natalia could feel her blood pressure rising. She wasn't going to stand there and take this. Not this time. As the agent moved on to the next passenger, without a second glance, Natalia grabbed her phone and quickly dialed Joseph's number, her hands shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "Joseph, I need you here. Now!" His voice was sharp on the other end. "What's wrong, baby?" "There's a problem, a big one. The TSA agent, he tore my dress, ripped it right in front of everyone. And the worst part, he was laughing. He thinks it's some kind of joke. Natalia could hear the shift in his voice. Joseph didn't take kindly to people disrespecting his wife, especially over something like this. "Stay right there. I'm on my way." She took a deep breath, holding back the tears that threatened to spill over. The moment felt surreal, like a bad dream she couldn't wake up from. She was no stranger to discrimination. But this wasn't just about race. This was about her dignity, her worth, being thrown out the window like trash. And that agent, he didn't know who he was messing with. As Natalia stood there in the wreckage of her ruined dress, waiting for Joseph, a voice from behind her broke the silence. A woman, probably in her 60s, dressed in a cozy cardigan and sensible shoes, stepped up beside her, concern in her eyes. "Baby girl, I saw what happened. You didn't deserve that. You've got every right to be mad, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Natalia blinked, surprised at the kindness. The woman gave her a warm smile, the kind that reminded her of her grandmother. "I've been through it too, sugar. Don't let these fools get to you. If you need a witness, I'm happy to speak up. You're not alone in this." For the first time that morning, Natalia felt a little spark of hope. The universe had a way of putting the right people in her path when she needed them the most. And as Joseph's voice crackled through her phone once more, the spark turned into a blazing fire. "This isn't over," Natalia whispered to herself, her chin lifting just a little higher. Not by a long shot. Natalia paced back and forth near the security checkpoint, trying to keep it together. The anger inside her was still simmering like a pot of boiling water about to spill over. But there was a calmness to her now, a steadiness that came with knowing Joseph was on his way. He always took care of things, always had her back. And this time, she wasn't going to let it slide. Not this time. As she stood there scanning the room, her mind replayed the agent's words. "It's not my fault your dress was fragile." The nerve of him, what a piece of work. Natalia could feel the weight of the stares on her, the judgment from strangers who had seen the whole thing go down. But what really gnawed at her was the way that TSA agent had sized her up, like she was nothing more than a target for his petty power trip. She'd seen that look before, and it always made her blood run cold. But she wasn't going to let him win. Just as she was about to call Joseph again, her phone buzzed. It was him. Natalia answered before it even finished ringing. "Baby, where you at?" Joseph's voice crackled through the line, sharp but full of concern. "I'm 5 minutes out, and I swear, if I don't get to this airport soon, somebody's going to regret it." Natalia let out a breath. She didn't realize she was holding. "I'm right here at security, baby. Just waiting." "Good. Don't move. I'm coming in hot. I've got something to say to this punk who thinks he can mess with my wife." Natalia could hear the fury in his voice. She wasn't worried. She knew Joseph could handle it. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a man who had worked his way to the top by making sure people respected him. And if they didn't, they learned real quick who they were dealing with. A few minutes later, Joseph stormed into the security area, his presence impossible to ignore. His sharp suit and polished shoes clicked against the tile floor, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning the room. He was every bit the man people looked up to, and when he walked into a room, people knew he meant business. Natalia spotted him immediately and felt a wave of relief wash over her. Joseph didn't waste a second. Without even looking at Natalia, he marched straight toward the TSA supervisor, a woman who was standing near the security desk. "Hey you!" he barked, his voice booming through the crowded terminal. "I need to speak with you, now." The TSA supervisor turned around, her face flickering with recognition as she saw Joseph, and then looked at Natalia, who was still standing there, visibly upset. "Sir, I'm not sure what the issue is." Joseph cut her off with a look that could freeze fire. "Oh, you know what the issue is, sweetheart. My wife just got treated like trash by one of your so-called agents. So you can either handle this like a professional, or I'll make sure your whole department knows about it." The supervisor's face went pale. Natalia could see the blood drain from her face as she realized who Joseph was. She knew who Joseph Jenkins was, the man who owned half the city and had more power than she could even comprehend. "Sir, I don't know what happened here," the supervisor stammered, clearly trying to keep it together. "I'll look into this right away." Joseph was having none of it. "Look into it? Nah, we're beyond looking into it. Your agent ripped my wife's dress in front of everyone, and don't even try to tell me it was an accident. I saw the way he was eyeing her. It was deliberate." Natalia felt her heart race, but she kept her composure. She wasn't some damsel in distress. She was a woman who knew what she deserved, and today she wasn't going to let anyone disrespect her. The TSA supervisor shot a glance at the agent who had ripped Natalia's dress, still standing by the checkpoint. The man shifted uncomfortably under Joseph's glare, but he didn't dare move. "Joseph, you know what we've got to do," Natalia spoke up, her voice steady, but filled with the quiet fury she had been holding back. "This isn't just about the dress. This is about what he did to me, and to every woman who's ever been disrespected by someone like him. I'm not letting him get away with it." Joseph looked at her, his expression softening for a moment. He knew exactly what she meant. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about dignity, about standing up and saying, "I won't be treated like this." "Damn right," Joseph said. "You want this to go away? We do it my way. We're going to show everyone what happens when you cross the wrong person." He turned to the TSA supervisor, his voice dropping low but filled with enough power to make anyone in earshot listen. "I want that agent fired today. No questions, no delays. And I want a public apology to my wife. I don't care if you have to call the media yourself. I'm not playing around." The supervisor opened her mouth, but Joseph wasn't finished. "And while you're at it, you can take a look at your whole damn department. There's no place for people like him in a professional environment. This is 2024, not the damn 1950s. Gabriella could see the supervisor's hands shaking, but she knew this was exactly what Joseph did best. He didn't wait for justice to come to him. He went out and took it. He had the power to make people listen. And when he spoke, people listened. The agent, who had been trying to slink away unnoticed, now found himself the center of attention. Gabriella could feel his eyes on her, but she didn't flinch. If he thought he could intimidate her, he had another thing coming. She'd been through worse. This was nothing. And then, just as quickly as it all started, the situation turned into a full-on spectacle. A few minutes later, an airport spokesperson arrived to address the issue, trying to smooth things over. But Joseph wasn't backing down. Gabriella stood by, watching the scene unfold, feeling something inside her click back into place. Today wasn't just about her dress. It was about making sure no one ever thought they could tear her down without consequences. As the TSA agent was escorted out of the terminal, head hanging low, Gabriella met Joseph's gaze. He gave her a small nod, as if to say, "We did this together." Gabriella felt a surge of pride, not just in Joseph, but in herself too. She had been hurt, humiliated, but she was stronger now. They both were. And now it was time to make sure everyone knew respect is earned. And this was just the beginning. As the TSA agent was led away, his face a mix of shame and disbelief. Gabriella stood tall, her anger simmering down, but her resolve stronger than ever. Joseph, cool as ever, kept his eyes locked on the chaos unfolding. "Apologies not enough," Joseph said, voice steady. "I want that man gone, and I want the world to know why." The airport spokesperson, visibly sweating, nodded. "We'll handle it immediately, sir." Gabriella stepped forward, eyes sharp. "You better. And don't think this will be forgotten. It's not just about a dress, it's about respect." Joseph squeezed her hand, a quiet assurance in his grip. "Don't worry, baby. This won't be the last they hear of it." As they walked away, Gabriella glanced at Joseph. "You sure know how to make a point." He smirked. "I make every point count." The agent was fired that same day. The press was soon all over it, and Joseph made sure the story went public. No one would forget how Gabriella was treated, and no one would dare repeat it. Gabriella walked out of the airport with a quiet smile, stronger than before. She wasn't just the woman in the torn dress anymore. She was someone you didn't mess with. Joseph leaned in, whispering, I've always got you, baby." And with that, they left, knowing they'd sent the message loud and clear. Don't mess with a woman who knows her worth.